You guys are all having a great and amazing day. My name's Brendan. This is B Cooks Exotics. Today we'll be breaking down one of my systems that I've been having running for a little bit now. It's an animal that's not really super common, but it's very interesting in its own form and fashion. A lot of people are intrigued by them based off of their peculiar looks and behaviors. They go by a couple different names, known as Mexican walking fish, water dogs, but most prominently known as the axolotls. So in this video, I'm going to be breaking down how I personally keep axolotls through my years of keeping them in the shop as juveniles or trade-in adults, and the pair that I have now. This pair was given to me by one of my friends a couple years ago when he was trying to break down some of his systems to focus on some other of his own personal projects. But I was happy to take them being golden albinos, which happens to be one of my favorite morphs when it comes to axolotls. They come in a wide variety of colorations, anything from black, the highly spotted ones, the naturalistic looking ones, they got the albinos, the leucistics, the goldens, there's also mosaics as well. And then Tetra through Glowfish is working with them as well, and then they're combining those with some of the other ones, making a lot of cool combos and almost hybrid looking ones. So I'll start off with tank size. Tank size for a juvenile, anywhere from a 5 to 10 gallon tank works well. You can do them bare bottom or with sand. A lot of times people are afraid of them actually swallowing a substrate, so I wouldn't keep them on like a pebble sized gravel, because if they grab a little bit of sand, shouldn't really be the biggest deal. But the best thing to do is going to be bare bottom. That way they can just scoop up the food, find the food easily, makes maintenance a hell of a lot more easier, and just all around it's one of the better things for the animal. Once they hit like the 4 to 5 inch mark, then I'd upgrade them to a 20 long. Just a 20 long, in my opinion, is one of the best aquarium sizes for them, because you're going to be able to keep them a majority of their life, if not their whole life. Because max size of an axolotl will end up getting 6 to 9 inches typically. However, from being at the shop, we did get some monsters traded in a couple times. One of them being 12 inches, and the largest that I've ever seen or have heard of being 14 inches. So that's just something to take into consideration getting these animals, that you may need to end up giving even a single specimen a 40-gallon breeder, possibly, depending on the genetics of the animal and the true size that it may get. Once they start hitting that 4 to 5 inch mark, then I safely would say you guys can start putting them with a substrate. Start doing one of the smaller grain gravels. You can definitely do a sand, because half the time if they do grab food, it does end up shifting out their gills, some of the sand, so you don't really got to worry about it all too much with compaction. If it is something you're generally concerned about, then just giving them like a feeding dish, just like a little glass container you use for like cat food or something like that you can get at Petco, works perfectly fine to eliminate that risk and give you more of a peace of mind. I know some people don't keep air with them. I personally keep an aerator with them, just a sponge filter right in the back, for a couple different reasons. One, because oxygen is just always going to improve an aquarium in any sense of the word. That way the substrate won't go highly anaerobic, and it's better overall. And then if you do want to mix fish in with them, obviously oxygen's a necessity. That's moving on to the next topic. Keeping fish with axolotls isn't one of the easiest things to do. I've tried it in the past with a couple different species, even faster moving species like Danios. They would even snack on them at night. Some people try keeping them with bigger fancy goldfish. I don't think that's a terrible idea, but based off of their dietary requirements, goldfish being much more herbivorous fish, while these guys being carnivores, it's going to be a little bit difficult to ensure that everything's getting a well-rounded diet. And then if you do try to do some fancy goldfish, just make sure you're not doing any of the massive ones like the telescope eyes, the blackmores, anything slow with super ridiculous fins, because axolotls will take munches out of them. If you do try it, try doing like some of the fantails, possibly an aranda. Don't do like a ranchu or a pearl scale, because they're slower moving. They end up not getting as big as the fantails anyways. In here you guys can see that I do have a couple fish with them. These are just fathead minnows. However, they're not really per se in there as friends, so that's gonna bring us to our next step. food and diet for these animals. Axolotls are definitely not picky eaters by any sense of the word. They'll eat anything from pellets to cut up shrimp to here, as you can see, live fish. In my opinion, I try to stay away from any dry foods just because there's a lot of fillers in them. It ends up clouding water. It's not... They do supply some minerals and nutrients and vitamins that some other foods don't, so it's good to mix them in here and there, but as of a staple all the time, in my opinion, it's not the best. If you end up getting a baby axolotl, which a majority of the population does, one of the best things to give them is a variety of frozen foods. So I would say doing mysis, brine, bloodworms, any of those, and then mix it in with one of the higher end pellets, like a New Life Spectrum Thera A or one of the Omega-1 carnivorous pellets. Once your axolotl starts packing on some size, then you can switch them to silver sides, you can switch them to earthworms, cut up shrimp, cut up clams, anything like that, anything meaty for them. Especially if you have a solitary axolotl, then that works really well. Once you get into keeping multiples, that's where it gets a little bit tricky, especially if you're not making sure that they're both, or the whole colony is getting enough food. Because one weird thing with axolotls is they do and will predate on each other. So they'll start taking limbs off of each other, they'll start biting at each other's tails, and it ends up being a pretty stressful life for these things. For me, I have the fathead minnows in there. The reason the fathead minnows are in there is just because it's an easy food to kind of just throw in there for them, because they will eat fish. I would prefer to have like a live bearer colony, guppies, endlers going, and it's something I would like to do in the future. But for now, these work well, especially if you're getting them from a relatively reputable source. And then if you're feeding them good quality foods, then all that good nutrients is then being converted over to your axolotl once they do consume the fish. One concern that some people may have with the fathead minnows or the rosy red minnows is the fact that they do sometimes contain some internal parasites based off of them being farmed or shipped in high numbers, and it's something you can see regularly. That's one reason I'm not a massive fan of feeding them to fish, because fish to fish, you generally have a much higher odds of those parasites actually transitioning to living in that other organism that's consuming them. Axolotls, for example, aren't a fish, so it's generally not something you have to worry about as much, because they have naturally been adapted to kind of not obtain any diseases that fish do have, given the fact that fish is one of their natural food sources in the wild. Makes sense, right? To me at least. Don't get these mistaken with the feeder goldfish though. Feeder goldfish, I'm not going to sound all too educated on this because I do got to do some more research on it, but I am going to say what I do know. It does cause hole in the head for fish, and then goldfish do have a chemical called xanathan in them, I believe, and that pretty much enables whatever is eating them an ability to consume protein and use it metabolically, so it will end up like kind of stunting some growth, and it's not something you want to be feeding out. Idealistically, I'd like to get a guppy colony going in here, or an endler colony, something that's just always breeding and breeding. That way you know that it is always good quality food for them, and you don't have to re-up on the rosy reds like every couple weeks. And that is something I am planning on doing in the future. I want to pack kind of the left side of this tank with some Java moss or Christmas moss kind of along that wood. That way the babies can hide, and then just pack it full of guppies and kind of just let them go to town. That leads me into the next topic of these, is decor for the tank. I'm personally a giant fan of making naturalistic tanks. I think they look pretty, they're much more self-sustaining, trying to mimic nature, because nature's obviously doing it right. So the more you can mimic nature in a home aquarium, more stable it's gonna run, less work for you. I'm personally not a fan of clown puke gravel and like some plastic plants and stuff, because there's no point in plastic when you can do live. Live plants is a topic for another day though, very passionate topic of mine. But in here you can see mainly you just want to have some hides for your axolotls, because they don't like being exposed to light all the time. So these guys are like the male's all the way on the right, just under the driftwood. He probably won't even move. He generally doesn't. He comes out at night, moves all around, eats, and hides all day. The female you can see all the way in the right do like shelter, definitely. The plants I have in this tank, nothing hard whatsoever. I got some varying Anubias species, I got some Bucephalandra species, I got Java Fern, I got Java Fern Trident mainly, I got Riccia fluvens, I got some salvia growing up top, which you can't really see in this video, and then I got some lucky bamboo sticking out all the way to the left. Lucky bamboo works fine because once it really starts growing, it consumes a decent amount of nutrients out of the water instead of these other slow moving plants. But you can't submerge lucky bamboo like a lot of people think you can. You only want the bottom half or so in the water. Other species of plants that work well would be wisteria, anacris if it's legal in your state, water sprite. You can do swords, crypts. That's one thing I want to get in this tank is a couple crypts, just because they're one of my favorite species of plants. And then you want to be able to have root column feeders. That way they're consuming any poop that falls into the gravel. It's basically the same as manure in a garden. But I try to keep it mainly more floating plants that don't need to be buried in the gravel, because like I said, axolotls are always just walking on the bottom, so you don't really want to take up too much of their real estate with big swords, big crypts. You want to kind of keep it just them at the bottom. I can't go too crazy with plants anyways in this tank because I got kind of a cheaper LED light on there, kind of some slower growers. It's taken a while for this Trident Java Fern to even transition, because a couple years ago it was just one big piece of immersed growth. And if you guys know how Java Fern is, you know how then it gets all the little babies, and now all those little babies are finally starting to get some size on them. But the nutrient consumption has definitely helped through the bamboo now that that's taken off, and then also the salvia on the top. Salvia, if you can't find it, it's basically a larger version of duckweed. Everyone has duckweed. Duckweed is an amazing thing for tanks based off of nutrient control. It keeps algae at bay, and it just grows and grows and grows. Everyone says it's a pest, but one of the only reasons it's the pest is because it's keeping your tank nice and clean biologically. One thing with axolotls is that's relatively good because it's just one less plug, less electricity that you have to run in the system, is they don't want a heater. They want just unheated. They want it like mid 60s, lower 70s if you can. They can get the little bit higher during the summer and stuff like that if you don't have an AC just during the day. But then if you do, make sure if you have a lid on the tank, you take the lid off. If you have a higher output light, that you're shutting that off, that you're doing kind of what you can for that. As for maintenance for your axolotls, there's really not all too much you guys got to do. Every system's different based off of your plant load, the size of the tank, the type of water you're using, but pretty much the only thing really producing a decent amount of waste in here is the minnows, and it's only when it's a decent population like this when I just re-upped on them. I let them go pretty much all the way down to then there's only a couple of them, and then I'll re-up with a new batch. But since there's all the plants, they kind of keep algae at bay, so I'm not really fighting any nutrient allergy battles or anything like that. I change about 5 gallons a month, leading out to be about a 20-25% water change a month. That's all you really got to do. Some smaller systems, if you're trying to pack more axolotl, like growing them out in smaller systems and power feeding them, then you may need to start doing a little bit more maintenance. But it's, again, every system's different, so you got to kind of just dial it in and see what's best for your individual system. Just like a lot of organisms, they don't need a light cycle, but they definitely appreciate it, because a lot of things do need a diurnal and a nocturnal night-like time in order for them to act properly. So during the daytime, you don't really see them moving around all too much. Unless you have a juvenile, then they kind of swim around. But once they get to kind of adult breeding size, I mean, as you guys have seen in this video, they haven't moved. And it's like that. It's like that all the time, every day. They're just very simplistic animals. They just kind of sit there, want to eat, and that's it. They sit there until a fish comes in front of its face, and then they plow it down. And then obviously if you want your tanks to be a little bit more biologically stable, then you need the plants. Plants obviously photosynthesize, so you're looking at kind of needing a light anyways for that. Unless you want to do a lot of plants coming out the top, like I have the bamboo coming out, you could have pothos, arrowheads, you could have a bunch of house plants growing out of the actual aquarium. So technically, and then you put that near a window, that's an equivalence. But then again, temperature comes into play with that as well. So you don't want too much sun heat coming through there and actually heating up the aquarium, especially in the summer. During the winter, not going to be that big of a deal, but during the summer, you might end up raising the temps a little bit more than you may think. As for sexing axolotls, that'll be a question some of you would be curious about. Females naturally have a much bigger stomach, especially once they hit the 4 to 5 inch mark, based off of them developing the eggs. And then also, the boys will have a pronounced bulge right where the tail meets the body, and that we all know what's in that. If you can't tell based off of those very minimalized descriptions, then you can always refer to some Google images. Just Google how to sex axolotls, and plenty of pictures side by side will come up. As for breeding axolotls, it's not going to be something I'm going to break down in this video because it's not something I've had experience with yet. Hopefully by the summer or midsummer, I'll be getting a couple clutches out of these guys, and then I'll be walking you guys through the process and seeing my experiences in raising them. They're not supposed to be too difficult. I have a general gist of how to do it. I just need the eggs and then we can get it going. But I'm not going to talk about something that I have no experience doing. Another unique thing with these animals is they have lungs and they have gills. So they'll need to breathe from the surface no matter what. So they'll need access to the surface. So don't block it by like a glass lid filling the water too high or something like that. They do have gills and they will breathe from the surface much less with the more oxygen supplied into the water. Thing that needs to be heavily taken into consideration, no matter who you are, if you're getting these animals, it is a commitment. It's the equivalent to a dog. They can live upwards and sometimes more than 15 years. And so that's something that you need to be committed to having for that period of time. It's not something you can just get because it's cute and little. You guys are going to need to end up hooking up a tank, possibly upwards of a 40 breeder for these things. I hope this video answered any of you guys' questions or concerns about axolotls and possibly even made you guys want them. If so, that'd be amazing because I love to motivate people in order to get some animals. But besides that, if you guys are interested in any of this content, found this video minorly interesting, I got a lot more kind of interesting super factual videos coming out. I got everything from the reptiles, a lot of different aquariums, gonna do some aquascaping, gonna be playing in saltwater again. And then I got a lot of collabs that I'm planning on doing with a lot of people. A lot of room tours and stuff like that. I'm going to be going to expos and all that kind of stuff. I'm big into breeding, so if that's something you guys would like to watch and kind of see, then that's going to be something that you guys should turn on your post notification bells for. So that way every time I post, you guys will be able to watch the video. And then if you guys do have a channel, please like, comment, subscribe, do whatever you guys got to do in order to get this channel up. Also make sure to check out the Instagram for a lot more kind of in-depth and a lot better photography of my individual animals. Thank you for all the support you guys have given me. I appreciate it. Every view matters, and you guys have a great day.